Let's start. Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to our behind the scenes episode with Swan Hellenic's Jane Wilson. So today we're very thrilled to be joined by Jane Wilson, Expedition Operations Manager at Swan Hellenic. Jane's incredible 30-plus year career has taken her from working as a scientist and lecturer to driving Zodiacs and leading expeditions in some of the most remote corners of the planet. So she has spent time on Macquarie Island and Australia's research stations, guided voyages through the Ross Sea and the Antarctic Peninsula, and now plays a key role in shaping Swan Hellenic's expedition programs. From operational planning and environmental compliance to delivering unforgettable guest experiences, Jane brings a wealth of hands-on expertise and insight into what it takes to design and operate successful expeditions in the world's most challenging environments. So with that introduction, welcome, Jane.
Thank you.
So pleased to have you here today. So let's just dive in. Jane, you had an incredible career journey from scientist and lecturer to expedition leader, and now operations manager for Swan Hellenic, a luxury expedition cruise company. How did it all begin?
Well, it was very much began in the Antarctic, which in some ways I think still is the heartbeat of expedition cruising. But actually, I've got some ancestors who did some early Antarctic marine research in the late 1870s, and a father that was very interested in Antarctic conservation. He was involved in the early overflights in the 70s. I also went to the university in Melbourne, which was then the Antarctic University. So it was coming at me from every which way, and I dreamed of going there. And in 1993, I got an opportunity to work as a field assistant on Macquarie Island, which initially was for 4 months, and then I went back a couple of seasons, and that led me to also working on all the scientific stations. And inevitably, you get exposed to in those days, the occasional expedition cruise vessel that would come by, and I thought, wow, that would be an interesting experience to be on board as a guide and sort of give that message out a bit broader than just the scientific community. So that's kind of where it all began.
Brilliant. And so for those listeners who may not be very familiar with Macquarie Island, what is so special about it?
Macquarie Island is part of Tasmania, but it is halfway between, so therefore Australian sovereign territory. It's halfway between Tasmania and the Antarctic continent, so similar sort of latitude as South Georgia. It's like South Georgia without the mountains. And so that incredible richness of wildlife that all, gathers there to breed during the summer, there's no room on the beaches. And I guess that the real highlight is the unique penguin that breeds there, which is the royal penguin, but very much wild, wonderful, remote subantarctic island.
Brilliant. So do you ever go back on the Swan Hellenic there? Because to be honest, I don't. Yeah, is it in the plans?
It is in the plans coming up in a couple of years,
Okay.
but I did go back years ago when I worked for Quark on the Captain Klebnikov, and I also went there with Heritage Expeditions, which was my first contract in 1997. So I started Zodiac driving and guiding in arguably one of the most challenging places to do both, and that's the subantarctic islands of New Zealand and Australia, and then the Ross Sea, as well as Commonwealth Bay, which of course is famous for Australia's Shackleton, and that's Sir Douglas Mawson, where he spent time exploring.
Brilliant. So moving forward and sort of fast forward to today's job, when you plan expeditions, where does the process actually start? And sort of if you can just tell us a little bit more about the destinations these days you sort of look after.
Yes, well, I mean, I guess sort of to lead into that question, since that first, I'd like to try this for a few months in 1997, I'm still involved. So I did discover the world of expedition cruising, where you're really giving people an unusual, unique experience and getting them all passionate about protecting these culturally rich and wonderful natural areas. So from the Antarctic, it led me to the Arctic and then everywhere in between. So planning an expedition, I apply the same sort of expedition mentality or process to wherever we are in the world. If it's we've just been in Brazil last week on SH Vega, and it's sort of the same principles. There's many people involved. It usually starts with a clear and simple vision, and certainly the Swan Hellenic CEO has a vision, and he's built technically sophisticated, wonderful small vessels. I've never worked on a vessel with more than 190 people, and I think that's where expedition cruising really comes alive. And it's very much an environment of focusing on immersing people in that destination. But on a practical level, at least 2 years ahead, a team of colleagues with expedition in port operations, expedition operations, and the actual destinations that shine when it comes to expedition cruising sort of get together and sort of join the dots. They have to know the world map very well. Like for us, 3 vessels, one in the Atlantic, one in the Pacific, one in the Indian Ocean. And you have to, from a commercial point of view, connect the dots to make, wonderful itineraries that go almost year round. So each vessel needs that initial planning, and it's usually starting on a practical level at least a couple of years in advance.
Absolutely. And so when you are planning these itineraries, because obviously you are probably moving the ships across multiple geographies with completely different highlights as well. One probably will be
Yes,
more focused on wildlife and truly wild experiences. The other one will be a little bit more cultural. And I
yes,
think Swan Hellenic really stands out as a brand that is very much focused on immersing people into different cultures and sort of going where no one else goes. So
yes.
what are the key factors that you have to get right before a single guest steps on board the ship, considering all that multitude of different elements?
Yes, well, I think you've alluded to it, like just from a sort of, if you step back, the culture of wanting to keep that
Mm,
expedition spirit alive, to explore and look around the corner. But basically, to get it right for guests, you have to involve all your experts. Whether it's
mm,
your sort of home office team who are maybe looking at the bigger picture and the permits and the legalities, to your captains, expedition leaders, port agents, destination companies, all of the ones that really understand expedition cruising. Not all port agents and destination companies do so. And to really pay attention to the detail, but keeping that sort of flexible, expect the unexpected
mm,
mindset as well. I think too, you've got to do it all. You've got to create the appropriate marketing materials to give a snapshot so people can get excited and want to go to these places, and then the right sales team that can answer all the questions that come before buying and then on the lead up to a voyage,
mm,
because it's all a different phase for a guest, that journey of the guest. And then having information to assist the guest's preparation, preparing it, thinking about what they're thinking about in the lead up to it. It might be apprehension about the Drake Passage or the heat in
mm,
the tropics. So trying to think about all of what they need when, and then to bring it to life as they come up the gangway, setting the expectations, staffing on board to bring that destination to life. You don't want a sort of a tropical botanist in the
mm,
Canadian Arctic. You've got to get all that right and have their passion as well. And in the background, the marine, the deck, the engine, all crewing, people
mm,
need to self-select to want to be in these places, because on a small ship it's great
mm,
camaraderie, as you know, and there's no room for sort of
to hide.
unhappiness. So
Absolutely.
everybody has to kind of want to be there and have this will to take the ship to these places on a macro and a sort of micro level. So really it's about having everything aligned to meet guest expectations, but also to exceed them ideally.
So, Swan Hellenic probably is the only expedition cruise company I know of that actually ventured into went to Socotra Island, for example, which I think is such an incredible place, and also probably challenging place both to sell and to travel to because of the east coast of Africa and the usual scare of the pirates and stuff like that. So
Yes.
from the point of view of planning such itinerary, would you say, or just in general, like all the itineraries you get involved with, would you say that paradoxically, sometimes planning a trip to a place like Socotra is harder than to plan a trip to Antarctica?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, as absolutely magnificent as, say, the Antarctic Peninsula,
Mm,
where almost 90% of the tourism is, and Svalbard, which is a small Arctic archipelago, those places are kind of set in a way. There's been, decades of experience. There's great professionalism in the industry to deliver well. Sure, the weather, wildlife is all part of it, but that's what I like about Swan Hellenic. They're hungry they're not scared of it being difficult. They're not lazy in that way. Like West Africa, what we're doing in Solomons and New Guinea, it's all a little bit adventurous. And Socotra's a great example because it's a little bit of a holy grail for even
mm,
some of the most seasoned people that are probably all now retired. Most haven't been there. I think the little red ship, the Explorer, went there once, and
mm,
that was on a bit of a whim. But we've been there 2 years in a row now, and we will continue to go there. But of course, same principles. You need all the right people that want to help you, whether it's shoreside,
mm.
contractors, whatever. And it happened, and now we've first time, second time through, third time. I think we'll get it. It'll almost become routine.
Brilliant. But I'm sure it's quite exciting both to get
Oh,
there
very
and to also,
exciting.
yeah.
And of course, yeah, as you know, arriving anywhere on an expedition ship, like I always think, backpackers used to be the leaders of travel. They'd get to places that were
Mm,
difficult for most, whereas I think expedition ships are even beyond that. They get to places most people can't get to. And what an exciting thing to do. You arrive and the canoes come out
mm.
in the Solomons, or the locals take more pictures of you than you take of them. All that stuff makes it very exciting.
Absolutely. So just for the context for the listeners, if you are not familiar where the Socotra Island is, it is in Indian Ocean. Is that right?
It's in the
Yep.
Northwest
Yep.
Indian Ocean. It's part of Yemen, but it has its sort of special status, and as far as the biodiversity goes, it's got some
Mm.
extraordinary indigenous plants, and the culture's this Afro-Arab culture, which is a little unique to the island as well. So unless you're coming through the Red Sea and going south towards, say, the Seychelles, it's really out of your way.
Absolutely. And I think, just for the context as well, I think Antarctica the last data I have had around 120,000 visitors in a season that we have data for. And I
Yeah.
believe Socotra gets like 1,200 visitors a year. So
Yes, because
take
you
note, guys, take note,
exactly.
guys.
You can, because you can fly in, and there's some
No.
interesting tour operators for sure. But yeah, it's exactly to me what I want to keep alive, because that's where I
Yeah.
started with that sort of excitement of new places.
So talking about, Socotra and going to the unknown and unusual, we all know that expedition cruising can be very unpredictable. And can you share an example of a time when things didn't go exactly to the plan and how the team adapted?
Yes, yes, indeed. I just want to finish that Socotra
Yeah,
comment too, because I think another part of expedition cruising is you sort of have to earn it. If
yeah,
you want to go to Tristan da Cunha or Socotra, you might have to, or Heard Island, for example, where the Australian Antarctic program is at the moment, or Kerguelen and Crozet, all those remote South Indian Ocean and very rarely visited islands for tourism. There's a lot of sea time, and I think sometimes that puts people off, but that's how you sort of earn it in a way. But getting back to your question about an example of, plans not going to according to plan, how long have we got? But I promise I'll only give one example. But having been an expedition leader for all those
yeah,
years, you become adept at that. You become
yeah.
good at and sometimes what your demeanor is what the guests pick up. So they're looking to you, generally the expedition leader more than anyone, sometimes the captain, but more often to give them the mindset and set the expectations. So if say for example you're going into an area that could be a little bit wobbly, like you're going into Vanuatu and you promise the world, or you tried to under promise, over deliver, but say you've been guaranteed a cultural demonstration, you go on shore and none of the locals are there. If you've kind of already got the mindset with the guests that we're going to experience things or that might not go according to plan, and that's part of the adventure, they almost get disappointed if it all goes according to plan. So I think it's about setting expectations and mindset. And then when things go wrong, it's easier for everyone to adapt as a group of shipmates together, staff and guests, and being transparent with that information as it comes to hand, just at the right moment, with your briefings and what have you. But a specific example, years ago, we were heading north from Norfolk Island, which is an island
Mm,
between New Zealand and the Solomons. And we landed on very marginal conditions because a cyclone was coming. And, the guests were a tiny bit scared, but we did it safely. But if we hadn't have done this, we wouldn't have been able to get them ashore. But it was all within parameters and risk assessment. But, you could feel the swell building as we came. And we'd shown them the map, the weather map of Windy, I think it was, and it showed this cyclone. So the guests were already sort of understanding
mm.
without us giving them the backstory at this stage, like captain's really worried, what are we going to do? Just day by day by day. And then when we made the final decision, which you don't want to decide too far ahead when it comes to weather because you don't know, but you want to give people the general picture. And this cyclone was massive and a little bit
Mm,
out of season. We had to travel around it because, of course, the best way around a cyclone or a or ice is often around it rather than through it. So we had to kind of go around the back side of it so that it was going away from us. And
mm,
this lost us 3 or 4 days. So that's a real hard thing to present to people, but they understood the logic, even though they weren't disappointed, and the staff came together and made all sorts of programs during the day to sort of keep people entertained without sort of overdoing it.
mm,
And we rescheduled the latter part of the voyage once we had a firm ETA of where we could get to. We rescheduled it big time, totally different to what it was originally, so that we could pack it in. So we could do 3 landings a day or 2 islands in a day or whatever it was, to squeeze more into that last few days. And everyone went away extremely happy with what they saw, and they'd almost forgotten about the cyclone, and they had a fantastic story for when they get home.
absolutely. And so, talking about these changes, and I think especially if you travel to these remoter places or sometimes to the areas that are less known even for the expedition cruise operator, I think, I heard a really great example last week at the AECO conference where somebody said, we are the experts of change, because that's something that I think expedition cruise companies expect. But how do you think, or what do you think travel advisors could do to help these sort of, to set the scene even before guests get on board the ship, to enable you guys who work on board the ships and have to adapt very quickly, sometimes taking people completely off piste, but maybe showing something completely beautiful, to make sure that the people understand it. What would you
Um,
say?
I think they've got to differentiate expedition cruising from other cruising. And I
Mm,
think one easy way to do it is size.
yeah.
Vessels less than 200 can do more and be adaptable compared to vessels, say, over 500. And those vessels somewhere between 2 and 500 are sort of a little bit of a hybrid, in my view. This is my personal opinion. And I think to differentiate what expedition cruising is, and seek out that sort of match with people's sense of adventure. And for example, if someone always river cruises, you might suggest an expedition cruise somewhere a bit mild, like maybe say around the UK, where you do a little bit of nice destination things ashore, but you have a couple of little landings on the Scottish Isles. So sort of try and match what people's interests are and just extend it a little bit into the adventure realm. But I really think understanding what it is, and of course the only way to really do that is get yourself on board and experience an expedition cruise, and then you'll see how self-reliant the ships are, how key the Zodiacs are to not needing any infrastructure ashore. We don't need gangways, we don't need buses, we just need to go, have a team of guides, and it all sort of comes to life with our own little independent floating, boutique hotel.
Absolutely, and
Hopefully that answers your question.
absolutely, yes. I think it's also a little bit of the as you were saying, it is about differentiating expedition cruising from large ships, and
Yes.
emphasizing the adventure. That
Yes.
the adventure means spontaneity, not always knowing what's going to happen, and sort of going with the flow and hoping for the best outcomes. And
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
and
And
that,
when things go wrong, that can be part of the adventure because it can be part of the culture. Like for
absolutely.
example,
I mean,
yeah, we had a tour in Havana in Cuba, and it was before many ships were going to Cuba. And
yeah.
the cars, I said, look, one of them always breaks down, but we've got a support crew, so don't worry. You won't be left on your own. And then people came back with they were disappointed that they weren't in the car that didn't break down, so they started to get the whole situation of why it was like that.
To be honest, some of my best personal experiences were exactly at the times when things didn't go according to the plan.
Yes.
From being we had to change a route when I was on a trip to Madagascar. So we ended up going and doing night jungle walk in a completely different place, which got us to experience bioluminescence because we were kind of like in a completely just random place, and Russian Far East trips as well. We couldn't go to Russian Far East, so we had to switch the itinerary back to the Alaska, and we went to some really insane places, going for the big diamete and small diamete between the two islands and stuff like that, which was once in a lifetime experience. And it all was the result of things not going according to the plan, an expedition team adapting very quickly in fascinating ways, just picking up a phone and
Yes.
speaking to the post
Yeah.
office and this little
Yes.
settlement, and people just sort of spontaneously putting up a show together. So
Yes,
I think
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, and this, which kind of leads to my next question. So, and you alluded to the size of the ships being small, and obviously the team is also quite small to a degree. So it's quite, and they must be versatile, and they must be able not to be only experts of the field, but also to be able to adapt, to be great speakers, and all sorts of different things. So how do you bring it all together seamlessly on board the ship with the various roles and people who work for expedition cruise companies?
Yes, well, I might start from what I think is the most important characteristic, and that is being a team player. I think when people are good at contributing to a
Mm,
team, that really is the one thing that seems to make that the wheels turn well. But obviously, they have to be people person. They have to be passionate about being there, and they have to be practical and safe, like whether it's driving Zodiacs or leading snowshoe trips or stand-up paddle boards or whatever it is. But I think that the number one reason you want someone there is some sort of expertise so they can bring the place or the things that people are seeing to life. So we really have to review what the important themes are for each region and maybe each voyage. You might have a astronomy themed voyage or a World War II themed voyage, and you want to recruit staff accordingly. and being guest friendly and team players sort of means that expertise they bring, they'll really be able to make it something special for people, and something that you might not see as a guest at a recap or ashore. The staff can make it an extraordinary experience. So it's a big jigsaw. Like for us, we've got 3 ships afloat, so that's sort of more than 40 staff aboard all the time, almost every day, and then hundreds on the sideline, depending on where we are in the world. So it is a huge jigsaw. And then, of course, you want the staff to be happy, because that bubbles over to the guest experience.
Absolutely. And so during last week at the AECO conference, one of the big topics was the local engagement, and sort of, obviously AECO looks after the Arctic, and that's just one region in the world. But, aside from places like Antarctica or the some of the remote islands, you often very often go to places where you encounter locals, where maybe encountering locals is the big highlight of the experience. How does Swan Hellenic work with the locals? I mean, how do you what sort of policy you have around that?
Yes, well, it's the same principle as the cultural engagement that AECO has sort of formalized in a
Mm-hmm.
way. In fact, we hosted a cultural engagement
Yes.
program with Gita on board in
Mm,
Iceland this year, and yeah, so it's the same principles, and where it comes for me, especially, let's think tropical regions, because they're the most complex. It comes from basic respect. And so, I've seen people do it different ways. They come ashore and they demand this and that and the other for the locals, and the locals don't understand it because they're culturally so different to us. But for me, it's going ashore and showing respect and communicating to the guests some sort of code of conduct when it
mm,
comes to cultural things. For example, we were just in the Amazon. We visited a small village that had never had a ship visit before. There was probably about 100 people in this village, and they had a little
mm,
boardwalk, and they invited us into the school. So, we told guests to not just walk into someone's house, or not take a picture, or ask before you take a picture,
mm,
especially when people can't speak English. There's a lot you can do with sign language.
mm,
And to really say, look, this is their community. They're being very generous, welcoming us. So show that return in some form of respect. And then a few basic rules, like don't take money for a photo, don't offer candy, don't create some sort of begging culture. And when we get more sophisticated, we will ask if we're going somewhere a lot, we'll ask the mayor or the teacher if they need something. We don't impose our attitudes on them. It's a cooperative thing, and we want them to smile when they see our ship come back, because we were friendly and respectful. So I remember one community we went to in some little islands east of Bali, west of Papua New Guinea, and they'd run out of first aid supplies, and we had all these sort of out of date bandages and things, things that
mm,
you knew you weren't going to sort of so we just gave them whatever we
mm.
could from the ship, because that's what they needed.
Yep,
So it's to me, it's about a cross-cultural awareness.
absolutely. And so Swan Hellenic, well, you have worked on board various different expedition companies. How would you say Swan Hellenic differs from your perspective as an expedition leader, and somebody who has been working in the sector for quite a long time? And and the second part of that question probably is, as somebody who gets involved with the itinerary planning, what do you think is the DNA of how Swan Hellenic approaches planning trips and taking guests to these amazing places?
And like, it's all, the answer to the question is almost the reason why I'm there. Like, I have been lucky. I've worked
Mm,
for so many different several companies over the years, and I think I've been expedition leader on more than 20 vessels, starting with some of the roughy tufty
mm,
Russian icebreakers, and then tropical ships like the Clipper Odyssey, which was absolutely brilliant. And so, and for me, the excitement and the adventure of almost wanting to look around the corner and wanting to find these authentic places and doing it in a way that is respectful is really what's important to me, and that is very much part of Swan Hellenic's DNA. They've created these technically superb ships. They're very sort of elegant, but in sort of an unpretentious way. Everything is about the destination, like the portholes are really big, and everything's about outside the ship, and that they're ambitious with their itineraries. And I think that they're, you know, that even though it's a relatively new company, amongst staff and guests, that they're starting to get a reputation for that, which in my view is keeping the original spirit of expedition cruising alive.
Fantastic. And from your experience in this role, what was the most challenging itinerary to work on?
Um, in over the years, or in
Just
recently?
let's say in the last couple of years, like what was the most challenging from a point of view of maybe finding staff that could, fit the itinerary, or permitting, or
Yes.
just finding,
Oh,
finding a way to, just
yeah.
move
Well,
around the place.
each region has its
Yeah.
challenges, but I think
Okay.
anytime we're going somewhere new,
Yeah.
you want to, you want to pull together a team that is authentic. So for at the moment in South America, where the team, we've got some South Americans as part of the team. So we've got Spanish speakers, Portuguese, people that are traveling through their own countries. So, you know, that getting that staffing right's probably the biggest challenge when we're going to a new area. But when it comes to permitting,
Mm,
dare I say it, I think New Zealand is the most challenging, and
mm,
Australia's not far behind. If you're looking outside
yeah.
polar regions, I mean, you know, the Antarctic permitting, of course, is a lot of work to set up as well. But you know, each region has its sort of slight challenge. It might be trying to get provisions, you know,
Mm,
to a remote place. So, but I think, you know, the big puzzle is new areas, getting the right staff, and depending on them to really deliver, which is a tall order when a ship hasn't been somewhere for a while.
absolutely. And so, do you have a personal place yet on your map to visit that you would love to go, or you sort of?
You know, I'd like just revisiting the Amazon and going to through a Narrows that I'd never been to. So for me, it's there's no real sort of big objective, but you know, I just enjoy looking at each itinerary because they're each unique, and there's always something on every itinerary that I still really enjoy. So, but as far as somebody asked me once, if you were taking your family, where would you take them? And I thought, you know, that is almost a good question a salesperson can ask them, ask themselves. If
Yeah.
you were choosing for your family, what would be important? You know, so if you treat a guest like your family and think, oh my goodness, you know, and I think to answer that question, Antarctic is number one. You know, you
Mm,
virtually can't get there any other way. And then Indonesia's extraordinary, 17,000 islands plus, still many thousands that haven't been visited by expedition ships. And I think the combination of Seychelles, Madagascar, I mean, Russian Far East, hopefully it opens up again. So there are a few what I would put at the top of the list as far as, you know, extraordinary expedition experiences. How about you?
well, a very tough question. I
Yeah,
think, I
it
think,
is, isn't it?
I think the one place I would love to visit is Kimberley.
Oh,
I
well,
haven't.
and
It has
speaking of
evaded me.
yes, speaking of places that are becoming more challenging, you know, more ships, and because
Mm,
with Antarctic you can go here, there, and everywhere, but Kimberley's linear
mm,
and the tides are unforgiving. So, and then you know, there's more and more layers of permits and traditional owner
mm.
permissions and everything. So, sorry to interrupt you. Yes, but Kimberley's extraordinary.
Yes, so that's probably on my sort of personal list. And Aldabra
Yes.
Atoll. Aldabra
Oh,
Atoll is another place where I keep on looking at the Swan Hellenic's itineraries, and and dreaming.
Well,
One day,
we were
one
in
day.
Aldabra, I think 2 days ago on
Okay.
SH Diana. Yeah.
Amazing.
Oh,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
Aldabra is something
Yeah.
special. It really is.
So, from your perspective, thinking about 2026 itineraries, and because the majority of people listening to us today are in sales,
Yes.
what would you recommend? What is your favorite itinerary the ships are doing next year that you'd say, please, take a look at that and consider?
Yes, well, I think, what's top of mind for me, and I suppose it's partly because I'm working on it, but as you know, we've got our third ship afloat now. That's
Yep.
the SH Minerva. And we're going into Asia Pacific for the first time. So, starting in Honiara, the capital of the Solomons, and going to all
Yep.
these Solomon Islands, then into New Guinea, and then finishing in Jayapura, which is the capital of West Papua, and then going on into the Raja Ampat, which is sort of
Yeah.
between West Papua and Sulawesi, and then up on through the Philippines. I mean, you could go on board. I'm just trying to look at the dates. You could go on board in early April and not get off until September. And I think we're only going to a couple of islands twice when we're in
Wow.
Raja Ampat. You could just go to new places, island hopping all the way from that big, lovely sort of arc of islands north of Australia and New Zealand all the way to Japan. And southern Japan's incredible.
Yeah.
It's sort of unknown. It's subtropical. It's a little more traditional. So definitely that region of the world. I mean, Chilean fjords, extraordinary. I
Yep.
think the Caribbean is a bit and Central America gets a little sort of ignored, but on a small ship, it's a different experience because smaller places. And then oh, I mean, goodness, Halifax to Reykjavik, that sort of early season up through Newfoundland and Labrador and onto Greenland, Canadian Arctic, generally speaking. Sort of West Africa. I mean, it's
It's
all
never
of the
ends.
above.
All of the above.
Yes.
Brilliant. Well, Jane, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. It's been brilliant to learn a bit more about you and about your work, and also hear a little bit more about Swan Hellenic. I do think it's one of the companies that really goes out of the normal routes, and very exciting itineraries as well. So for those listening, I would very much encourage you to look at the itineraries. And having traveled around the South Pacific myself, I think it's a brilliant way to explore these islands because there's no other way to get there, and to experience the cultures and actually phenomenal snorkeling and water-based activities that probably once you snorkel in Raja Ampat, you cannot snorkel anywhere else after that in your life, or to have the same moment of awe at the richness of the marine life there. So thank you once again, and I hope all of you listening enjoyed it. There was, let me just have a look.
Well, thank
Oh,
you
okay.
too.
So there's
It's
actually,
always
Jane, we
great.
do have a question. I think we have a
Yes.
question. As a travel advisor, what would you say is the best place to start with learning for both expedition visits and gaining knowledge to help our clients?
The best what to visit? Place or
So,
website?
what would you say is the best place to start with learning for both expedition visits and gaining knowledge to help our clients? I think the question is more about the destination, sort of which destination to go with. Yeah.
Well, I think one polar place, and I would favor the Antarctic Peninsula because it
Mm,
is all action packed and really in a way where it all began in 1969 with a purpose-built vessel.
mm,
And then pick one tropical place, and of those, I think very much the Indian Ocean or the Pacific. So somewhere in the more remote islands in the Western Pacific in the Melanesia area, and then Seychelles, Madagascar. So I think that one tropical and one polar destination would give you the ultimate sort of understanding if you only had limited time. And then of course there's lots of websites. I mean, if you've got a question, Google
mm,
it. There's bound to be a YouTube video showing someone getting dressed for a polar or a tropical expedition. So I think there's loads of stuff online, and the industry associations, have a look at the IATO and AECO websites. They give you all
mm.
sorts of interesting sort of maybe sort of back of house knowledge, but nevertheless, it gets you to some level of understanding, I think.
I would also encourage you, Karen, to have a look at our academy. We actually have destination courses plus expedition cruise operator courses. So I think when you look at the, you can learn about the destination, and I think it's important to also understand the overall scene, especially in destinations like Antarctica, and then also learn about individual operators to understand the differences between them, and that should really help you to sort of start your journey. And I totally agree with Jane that Antarctica probably is the best place to start, because this is where majority of clients will ask you as well. They will probably learn about expedition cruising because they want to go to Antarctica, and then it's a nice way to sort of get the others join. But thank you, everyone. And I don't think we have any more questions. No. Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody, and thank you, Jane. Hopefully, we'll see you on board at some point, maybe in Aldabra Atoll.
I hope so.
Thank you so much.
Great.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.